when I'm on the road doing something, I am constantly like anxious about the next thing I have to do. It might be 60 miles away, but I'm already anxious about making sure I hit it.
Do I need to be in the left lane?
Yeah, exactly.
In an hour?
Butterscotch
Shenanigans. Hey everybody, welcome to episode 480 of Coffee with Butterscotch, the game dev comedy podcast of Butterscotch Shenanigans. I'm Seth and I'm the games programmer.
I'm Adam and I'm the miscellaneous programmer.
I'm Sam and I'm the artist.
And this is a show where we talk about life, business, and working in the games industry. Today's August 8th. Sorry, we moved
August 8th.
August 8th. 22 by 4. And before we get started, we have a warning. There's going to be profanity in this show. And we'd also like to thank our recurring supporters over at moneygrab.bscotch.net. Thank you so much for your monthly donations to help keep the podcast going. So we got just like one thing to talk about, and then we're going to get into a question, maybe a second question.
It's good. Temper expectations.
Yep.
Yeah. So studio-wise, we're just jamming on Crashlands 2. Lots of things are happening, but nothing that we're going to spoil. So instead, we're going to talk about dumb phones.
Yeah. So
let's go.
Yeah, I don't know if our audience is particularly familiar with this, but there's a new kind of phone coming out.
A new kind of phone that's an old kind of phone.
Yeah, it's basically it's if you took the stuff on a smartphone that is super useful, so maps, music, texting people, calling, whatever, and then just removed all the rest of it, all of it. So there's no internet that you just like browse. There's no Twitter, no Reddit, whatever. You get a dumb phone. And I think the most popular one I think now is the Light phone. And there's like the Light phone 3 is coming out soon. And these are one of those things that I've been eyeballing for a while because
Did they not have a browser either? Is that what you're saying? Like they got
correct.
Yeah, you don't need to browse.
On the one hand, I get it, but on the other hand, I think that's one step too far for me.
So that's the thing is like I think that the challenge with I think most of us have experienced like when you got a phone, you kind of always have a portal to everything because you got the internet on there. So even if let's say you're like, I don't want to be on Twitter anymore, delete the app. Well, you could just open the fucking browser and go to Twitter, right? You're like, well, let me set up my manage my well-being controls or whatever the fuck. Let me set timers and stuff so that they turn off. Okay, well then it asks you, hey, do you want you only have 1 minute left? Do you want to turn this back on? Are you good with that? So there's all these opportunities where you can just like undo that higher level want that you have of not fucking around.
I have this problem, especially with Reddit, because Reddit lives in this horrible space where it's entertainment. It's, I guess you'd call it angertainment, which is like the social media outrage machine type of entertainment that it still gives you nothing other than anger. Mm-hmm. And it contains a treasure trove of knowledge about all kinds of esoteric problems that you actually need to solve. It's like if I want to,
it's like the internet itself. It's an encapsulation.
If I want to block Reddit, then like at some point during the day, I'd be like, oh, I have a question, and I Google it. Of course, Google doesn't have the answer. Where's the answer? On Reddit.
Yep.
And then I got to unblock it and then go through the whole process again.
So I've gotten kind of fed up with this because part of it's having a kid, you have a lot of these interesting downtime moments where you can't really do anything, and the kid's not doing anything either. Like, let's say putting a kid to bed, right? The kid's asleep on you, but you got to wait like 15 minutes or so before you like put them in the crib for real, because otherwise they'll wake up. Just an easy example. So, it's a ripe place where you can sort of rebuild these habits of like just checking on your phone for some stuff, or browsing the web or whatever else. And I was just getting real tired of it because I think I wasn't tired of it in the sense that it had gotten any bigger than it ever has been for me in terms of like just phone usage. Just that I was just
don't want to be doing it.
I just don't want to be doing it. And the thing is, like I've tried so many things. Like all these, I've tried the blockers, I've tried like the well-being tools that are built in. And Seth, to your point, it's like there's things that I need to be able to do, but also like contextually, I might have already blocked them, and so I gotta go turn them off. And so anytime you're routinely touching those controls, you're kind of in a spot where like that's a short-term solution because you're gonna fall right back into those habits. So one of the interesting things from habit research is that they call it habit extinction, which is like frankly the weirdest way to put it, because when habits get kind of like overwritten, they don't go away. Okay. They're just sort of dormant. So any habit that you've built.
I like to think about it like it's like a road where like the more you walk on it, the deeper the groove gets.
Yes.
And if you start taking a different path, the groove is still there now in your brain.
Exactly.
And if you at some point later, if you take one step back down that road,
Boom,
you're
there. Yeah.
which is I love the term being in a rut, which is like comes from the old like
Wagon
carriage
wheels.
days where like the roads would be like dirt, mud, whatever, and lots of wagons would go through and they would like carve these deep grooves into the road. And if they get too deep, then you hit a point where your wagon can't turn or do like you're just stuck in this groove.
You're on a train.
You're just on tracks now. Yeah. And so it's like I feel like habits work that same way. Like
they do.
The grooves are in there now. And you gotta just go a different path every time, otherwise you're stuck.
Yeah,
you know?
and so what's been bugging me is I'm like, I feel like I'm pretty good at doing self-management, self-change stuff. I've done it in a bunch of different areas over the years, and this one thing just like has been the stickiest fucking thing. I just haven't been able. I've always at times had a total grip on it, and it's been fine, but it is not particularly stable. Right. Because so many things push against it. Right. So Adam, to your point of like the idea of not having a browser on your phone when you're out and about feels wild because like so many times you're like, let me look up a thing.
Yeah. There's like something I want to know for some reason while I'm out related to being out, you know? It's
Yes.
like, I was like, oh shit. Like what is, it's like I'm at a
But
store.
the problem is like
what is that thing? I got to go Google something, you know? Or, yeah.
But there's this, I feel like there's this Venn diagram of stuff where it's like, if you're out and about, how often do you have to look up something on the browser that you need to know right now that's like relevant to what you're doing, right? It's like I feel like
it is rare. It
It's
is actually rare, right?
Yeah.
Well, there's
But
also
again, it's like the
have
Reddit
to
problem,
versus
right? Like-
want to, right? Because like,
Yeah.
because the moment I have any question, I would just want to be like, ooh, and then just go start Googling to see if I can get an answer to it, you know?
we all want that. you know?
But as in like that's one of my actually core habit loops using my phone is like it's my getting an answer to a random thought I had device, you know. And you're right that I strictly don't need answers to those questions, you know, most of the time.
And they typically just go off the dome, right? You like get it, and then it's like it's not baked into memory.
You're like, and then you go,
hardly.
huh?
Yep.
Interesting.
And then you move on from it. So yeah, I was just like, I'm tired of this. So instead of plonking down money for one of these like devices that's specific for it, they look very cool. But instead of doing that, I was like, let me just like see if I can actually make my phone dumb. How dumb can I make a Google Pixel?
How dumb can a smartphone get?
Can I make it so that it just doesn't do the things that constantly are like siren calling me back in a way that makes it so I cannot get on that road in just at all, right? And so I
Can
thought
you put up like a big gate in front of the road?
Yeah.
You know, that just keeps you from getting in.
So I looked into it and ended up I disabled Chrome, my Gmail, Discord, and then I never really had any apps is the thing. Like the internet is just a problem for me. And so I basically there's like those three big ones that I would just kind of be on my phone randomly and accidentally spend like 10 or 15 minutes on. And YouTube, which YouTube was the weirdest one because like, again, like Adam, like you're saying, I do use that frequently on my phone or something like that if I'm trying to fix something or whatever else, right? Get like a video. So I was just like, you know what? Let's just try this. And I keep all the other stuff. So I have Workflowy. I have my Kindle, right? So it's not that I don't want to ever like look at the phone. It's that if I'm looking at it, I want to get something out of it, which is either I'm reading a book, which is like a longer form thing that I'm actually going to fucking remember, or taking some notes in a Workflowy about a thing that I want to ask a question about later when I get to my machine, right? Back to my computer. And so far it's been so good. I can't even
you want to replace because like I think the default way that probably all of us use our phone is we don't pick it up with the intention of using it for something.
Correct.
It picks itself up and it decides what we are going to do with it. Right. So you just have some downtime and then you find yourself just scrolling through something on your phone and waiting for something to pop up on it. You know, it's like the slot machine thing, right? Like just waiting for something interesting to pop up on it, whether you're like looking at Instagram or YouTube or Twitter, like, you know, just any type of a social media content mill type of platform, right? Yeah. So then like if you think about how you handle a book, it's where you go, I want to read that book. And then you walk over to it and get it off the shelf or whatever. And then you like make time to do it. And it doesn't do anything else. So you're committed.
Yeah.
You decided what to do and now you're going to do it.
But I think even in the case of like the Kindle app, for example, you can still do that thing where you basically open your phone, you know, randomly while you're waiting for something. And then you're like, oh, I guess I could read But again, what you get out of actually reading stuff versus like scrolling Twitter or some shit is, to me, what feels like it's a higher value trade for time. And so it's like, okay, I know I'm not going to be able to completely punt like the whole series of habits around like having a phone and whatever. But if I can at least cut it off at the knees on this stupid, like you have access to the whole internet thing, and then make it so that if I am fucking around, I'm fucking around by reading, then probably
which is good.
It's going to net out a little bit better. And it has. It genuinely has. So like if I want to look at stupid shit on the internet, I have to go to my computer or like pick up the tablet, and then do stuff on there, which is so much more of like a real obvious choice that you're doing that, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Well, it changes the degree of intentionality, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so I've really enjoyed it. I don't know if anybody else has experience with this stuff, but it's been much better than trying to do all the fucking setting up a labyrinth that I just end up bulldozing through after a week.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges for me, a lot of what I want to do when I'm like doing the high value kind of stuff on like my phone. So same scenario, I'm like waiting for something or whatever. Is I'll be like catching up on like patch notes for like VS Code, right? Or I'll be going through my RSS feed to try to find articles that I haven't read yet that are, in domains that I'm interested in. I'm trying to stay on top of. And of course, those open up in the browser and all that kind of stuff, right? So a lot of what I'm doing in my habit loop that I want to be doing requires like, because there's just not a way to limit that experience because it's a broad discovery based kind of system rather than like, it's not just a few websites or anything like that.
Yeah, I just tried to move it. So instead of doing it randomly, whenever I was waiting, I would just make a note like, go look up this thing or something like that. And then do it when I'm in at the machine in a more stable environment, if that makes sense. So it's less.
Yeah, it does. I think it's one of those like, to me, like reading a random book isn't better time spent like in random like minutes, whatever, right? Than like reading my feed, for example, right? So I think the challenge here is like trying to figure out what is it that you're trying to do. And it's like, so what you're saying is like you're basically building a system like given what you're trying to do that you can actually kind of cut off all these points of access, right? And make the whole thing work really well for your full set of like what you want to be doing in your downtime and how that works. Which is great. And like I technically could do the same thing, but I would be cutting out some things that I actually am trying to do,
Oh, sure. So that's always what it is. I think it's basically where you're at.
Yeah, it's just choosing where, and I know for me, like my core strategy has always been if once I start to feel like something is just too time consuming, I basically take advantage of the fact that all these fuckers make their mobile websites suck so they can try to get you to use the app. And I refuse to download the app. Because then it's like
it's not a bad strategy.
So I'll pull up Reddit periodically, and every time I fucking open the page, it's like it doesn't let me do anything until I tell it I don't want the app. Just keep using Chrome,
Reddit in particular is hilarious because the mobile web version of Reddit is different from the desktop version. Mm-hmm. So they went out of their way to make a mobile web version, but the only reason it exists
is to try to get you to the app.
Is to try to get you to stop using the mobile web version and download the app. They added they have a ton of bullshit on it that just makes it bad.
Yeah, they made it a bad experience. And so now
on purpose.
So I use like I found that by using the mobile version of just about any app. So if it doesn't have a mobile version, then unless I like really want it for some reason, then I just don't. I'm just like, okay, I just don't have that. If they don't have a web version of the app, and otherwise, like, because like I never use Facebook except on occasion. I'm like, I need to that's where something is going on, so I need to be able to touch base with it. So, which I've had to this week, but I'm only doing it on my phone, and God, it's a shitty experience. It's just terrible, and so. It makes me want to stop using it the moment I touch it, which is on top of also Facebook just being a shitty experience, period.
That's why I'm just like, I'm just going to, because it's actually not to your point earlier about like, the value of say reading your articles versus reading like a book or a random book, whatever else. It seems like an exchange of, it's like the same deal. The difference to me is basically that I can only read books, right? Yeah. So it's that I can't go do the other things, which is where
it also means I'm not making an argument for or against anything. I'm just saying.
Yeah. I'm just explaining like why it ends up working for me in a way that like other stuff hasn't, which is that it actually fully isolates the fucking device.
Yeah. It prevents you
all
from
the stuff.
Yeah, and to me, like that's just the point that I was making is like the challenge that we all have is we're trying to figure out what it is we're trying to do, and what it is we're trying to not do, and how to make it so that we push more of our time into the stuff we want and not into the stuff that we.
But it's an interesting experiment though, because you can literally just like so whether you're on iPhone or Android, you can just disable the browser or YouTube. Like you can disable those like actually built-in applications, right? And it is I'd recommend it just like trying it out for like a day or two, because it's interesting how many things like that you were talking about where it's like how much you think you need it versus like the question you had just goes away into the ether after like 5 seconds.
Oh yeah, well we get so accustomed to building in a sense of urgency into everything once it's possible to do those things immediately.
Yes.
You know, like I've heard a lot of people talking about how, you know, once they got off Twitter after using it for a long time, they'd have these moments where they would like think of something and their immediate reaction to their own thought was, I got to tweet this. Right. And then they would have that weird moment where they're like, wait, I'm off Twitter. I guess I'll just exist in the moment. I guess I'll just have this thought and it's okay. Like I don't need to just broadcast every fucking thing that pops into my head out into the world. But as long as that's possible, it feels like something that you have to do. You know, it creates this sense of urgency and importance that just isn't it's not. Yeah, it's fabricated in your mind. You know, you don't have to do it. You just don't have to do it.
Yeah. So yeah, I've enjoyed kind of turning my phone into a dumb phone for a period, and I'm curious to see how long it'll last, because that's always been the problem. It's like again the bulldozing issue, which is like at some point you're like, going on this trip, I should have the browser, or like, I just need the browser right now for something. I'm going to turn it back on.
Well, there's
also something it feels like a right tool for the right job problem, because the beauty of a general computing device, like a desktop computer or a modern cell phone, right, is that it's for every problem. But that's also the downside, because when you're trying to solve a particular problem, the fact that it can solve other problems also can get in the way of that, right? Mm-hmm. So like on my desktop machine, my habits are all so like work focused all the time that I just don't have any struggles on my desktop computer, right? Because it's like if I do anything besides work, I feel it and I don't like it, like kind of already, right? And so the habit loop there is fine despite it being a general purpose device. On my phone, it's all over the place, like because I use the phone for so many things, many with low intentionality, some with high intentionality, right? But the problem is that it's one device that over time has become able to do everything.
Too much.
Yeah. And so I have my Kindle that I absolutely love. And like anytime I'm going anywhere where I think I'm going to read, I take my Kindle. I take my Kindle and my phone, actually, because like my phone, because I need to be able to call people or do whatever, right? But then I'll just like pocket my phone and just read the Kindle, right? And I think part of what we're missing is there's not really, because then the phone still solves every problem, right? Yeah. And it
has a Kindle app. So
it's got a Kindle app, but
you could also convince yourself like, I guess I'll just leave my Kindle at home and I'll just read on my phone, you know.
Yeah, but that's why I'll just like very specifically, if I'm going to the doctor or something, I know I'm going to be in a waiting room, then I'll just bring my Kindle along, so that way that's how I shut off like everything else, you know. And I think there's this like missing. I think it's not even that there's a missing zone. I think the idea of like a dumb phone. Not as in like turning a smartphone into a dumb phone, because it's still a smartphone, right? But as in like a literal dumb phone. Yeah. I think that one to me is interesting if you also have ways of like opting in to other feature sets when you need them, right? Because
that's basically what the light phone. They build their own things and they call them tools. So there's no apps. Yeah. Right. They just have like maps. They have basically it's trying to do.
Is it Google Maps at least?
I assume so. Yeah.
Okay.
So you just type in a thing, find it.
Because if you had like the last thing I want because I used to have a Garmin for road trips and stuff. Garmin, what do you call it? Thing?
That's
GPS.
one where you had to like pay every year to get your maps updated or something.
And it's just not very good, And that's one of those things that's like it's impossible to beat Google Maps, right? But if you're gonna go anywhere, like having a device that has Google Maps feels like it guarantees it has everything else, whether you want it or not, right? But if it were the case that yeah, exactly. You need to be able to get around, do things.
All right, I'm gonna tell an old man who yells at cloud story though about maps, because I did have one experience a long time ago that has always like resonated with me when it comes to having like really good maps to go somewhere versus not, and kind of like what the difference is. because, we're all from a time when you had paper maps, right? Like having a GPS in your pocket, just honestly, it wasn't even really a thing until like 10 years ago. And so there was also that middle time where you had Garmin's and other stuff like that. And then before that, we had like MapQuest, and you would like print the map off, or you would just have, an atlas. You'd like go to a gas station and buy a road atlas.
Speaking of which, I actually just purchased a new atlas because I was like, I haven't had one of these in a million years, and it just
seems like it would be a good thing to have,
fun, but also a good backup.
Yeah, like what happens if the sun sends a giant EMP that knocks off the electrical grid? How do you go places? How do you know where the fuck you are?
Or even more boringly, it's just I fully lose GPS signal like on the road trip.
Right. And then you're just like, oh no, I
don't know where I am.
I literally have no way of knowing. So this was probably 10 years ago. I was driving from the middle of Iowa over to northern Wisconsin. So I had to go across the Mississippi River, and I had to drive, east and through like Illinois and stuff like that. And it just so happened that in the days prior to my trip, there was a bunch of flooding, just tons of rain, tons of flooding. And so by the time I got to the Mississippi River at the place where I would normally cross, the bridge was closed. And you don't have real-time map updates, right? And so then I'm like, the fuck do I do? So I do have a map, a paper map. And so I start looking at my paper map, and I'm like, okay, so I'm looking upstream trying to figure out like
follow it north until you
I know I need to go north.
But there's no way to know where you could cross until you get
because
there.
I don't know which bridges are closed. Yeah. So I'm like, all right, well, I'll just go back, and I'll head north a ways and kind of travel along the river to the next bridge. And then once I can get across, then I'll be able to, reconnect with my intended route. So I went north, and I couldn't find an open bridge for 2 hours. Oof. And I ended up taking these like back roads, and I kept getting like further and further away from like population centers and into like small towns and stuff. And there's this one moment that I've actually tried to find this place multiple times, and I've never been able to find it again. But I basically I was going through this like dense forest, and I went through like an alcove of trees, and it just like opened up into this beautiful valley that was one of the most beautiful places I'd ever seen. And it was just like lush and green, and there were flowers everywhere. And it felt like it was a sheltered place because it was like hills on all sides. And there were just like a couple of cute little houses in there. And I was just like, I want to live here. Like, this is incredible. And I drove through it, and I actually like stopped for a while and just like stood outside my car and just kind of like
taking it in.
Took it in. And then, then I carried on my way, and my what was supposed to be like a 6-hour drive ended up being like a 10-hour drive. And I ended up making it there. But like, I had to explore, and like I saw shit that I never would have seen. And maybe if I was like staring at a GPS the whole time, even if I had seen it, I may not have even noticed.
You get rooted in the real world in a very different way. You're doing that actual map work. You know what I mean? As opposed to just like
and of course it sucked to have to spend all that time like trying to figure it out and be in the car that much longer. But like we've talked in the past about how like the opposite of convenience is adventure. Like there is a dichotomy there, and like the more shortcuts you can take and the faster you can just skip past stuff and get to your destination, the less likely you are to experience things that are new that you've or have to do something and like flex beyond your normal comfort zone and think about things in a way that you haven't thought before. And so, which isn't just like, of course, I fucking love my GPS, and I use it literally every time I get in the car, pretty much. Yeah. Even if I'm going somewhere that I know where I'm going, just in case there's traffic or other bullshit going on.
Yeah, so that it knows about that you don't.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because like things like
something is lost there.
Because sitting in traffic for half an hour gains nobody anything, right? Mm-hmm. And some people because you were basically taking a vacation trip, so it didn't really matter, that you were.
I did need to get there at some point.
Eventually,
but it was not. It was not very impressive.
But if you're like trying to get to work, trying to get somewhere, and
important meeting.
Yeah, I think the world around us doesn't allow for that much flexibility. But also there's also all kinds of
slow.
Yeah, there's all the safety issues and stuff too, where it's like, it's one of the things I like the most about having just like the map on all the time when I'm driving, it's just like, because there's nothing that it allows. Is actually it allows you to be a little more present in a different way, right? Because if the map is just on, but you don't have to look at it, right? Because it'll just tell you stuff, right? If it's on and you can trust that it's working, and you know that it'll recompute your route if you fuck something up, right? It also means you just kind of get to drive and not worry so much about, because like I know like personally when I drive, because I'm bad at visualizing things, bad at remembering things. And so like when I'm on the road doing something, I am constantly like anxious about the next thing I have to do. It might be 60 miles away, but I'm already anxious about making sure I hit it.
Do I need to be in the left lane?
Yeah, exactly.
In an hour?
Because I know if I just like start, if my brain just starts to meander and do its own thing, and I actually become present and like kind of like look at what's outside and that kind of thing, that the moment I start to do that, I'm just going to become oblivious to the fact that there's things I'm supposed to do, you know. And and so for me, actually having that just sitting there being like, I got you covered. I'm going to tell you what to do when it matters. Actually lets me be in the present in a different kind of way, which it changes the shape of like the kinds of things that can happen, right? But I have even just in a city where getting around can be really chaotic because of just the sheer number of roads, how many under construction at a given moment. Like I had a physical therapy in sort of like South St. Louis. It's like a 25-minute drive. It's not that far away. But on the way back, it's like this combination of like weird changes you have to make off of some roads. And then like 3 different places where there was construction going on with extremely unclear signage so that like Google could help me out with what the current scenario was, you know, where I just got like, I was just meandering for like half an hour, right?
You were doing a biased random walk toward
I knew
home.
exactly. And I knew where I was trying to go. So like I could just like favor kind of moving in that direction when like the GPS wasn't caught up yet and that kind of stuff, you know? And so still like, but the whole time though, I was just like, well, my worst case scenario is like eventually Google is going to get me there, you know? So again, I got to kind of like not stress about it in a way that I would have if like that surprise happened where I was like, oh shit, I don't know where I am. I don't know how to get from here to there. And now I have to like pull over, I guess, and like try to figure out how to do that. So that, yeah, I think it's like with all this stuff, it always depends on how you engage with it. Right.
I think that's the tricky part, I think, with where everything's gotten to now. I mean, even to your point about just kind of using GPS all the time, is like, because you can get to places with kind of almost complete knowledge of the path being the best path, then it is wild. It's a wild idea and seems completely inefficient and dumb to be like, I'm not going to do that. It seems like basically everything hurries us along quite a bit, right? In the same way that Tessa's point about the Twitter thought. You have a thought, you're like, oh, I should tweet it. If you're like, I'm going to go somewhere, I should do maps, because otherwise, I mean, who knows what will happen?
It's just right there. It's already in your pocket.
It's free. Yeah. So it's so hard to say no to, even in contexts where, you know, you might be better served, and not necessarily in Maps case, but, you know, you might be better served by like not having access to that capability in that particular moment, right?
Yeah.
So it's just that's what it's all about.
So, yeah, it's just the problem with a general computing device is like its benefit is its curse. You know, if you want to be able to solve a collection of problems, like, and you actually do want those solutions, the best tool is a general computing device because it can solve any set of problems. But the moment you have that, it can also do everything else too, you know, and trying to find ways to like,
it can also create problems.
Yeah. But it would be kind of cool if like we just had a Google Maps device that was all it did. It's a GPS, but with Google Maps, right? Mm-hmm. Like, but also then, because that also would mean too that like they could invest a little more heavily in like making the GPS receiver really good, so that you are less likely just to lose access to it. You know, like it'd be dope if like that was a thing that existed, because then I could have my Kindle and I could have my actually good GPS. Because the last time I used even like a more recent GPS specific device, you know, fucking sucks. Those things suck. They're pure. I don't get it. They should just be using Google Maps. Everything else.
They have one job, you know.
Yeah,
well, I mean, it's a complicated job.
It is. It's a hard job.
Just one.
I think we need more kind of one-off devices is what we really need. And I guess what you're saying is like the light phone, like it's not a one-off device. It's solving like a subset.
It's just providing an actual edge to it's treating it like a tool. Basically.
Yeah, and the problem, of course, is like if it doesn't give you the edge that you need.
Yeah,
like there's not. there's an infinite combination of like what you could put together and sell as a new
the thing that
phone.
kills
Really
it
what
for
you
me
need
is
is like one-off devices, you know?
the thing that, well, I mean, kind of, because like you don't really want infinite one-off devices because that's like also super annoying in a variety of different ways.
Oh
right?
yeah, it also sucks.
So what you want is just to be able to fucking decide, and it's just actually so hard to do that, I think, in the current ecosystem, right?
Well, yeah, it's hard because everything on your phone wants your time.
Yeah.
You know, like YouTube wants you to watch YouTube for 4 hours a day because the more you watch, the more ads they can show you and the more data they get about you so they can show you more ads.
Yeah,
like,
so it's just like I'm just over it. So I'm going to stay over it for a while.
I have found, and I don't know how much of this too is like being a millennial where my life was on a desktop computer, right? To this idea of like shitty mobile experiences being like the core means by which I prevent myself from getting too sucked in. Like YouTube is one that's always been interesting to me because I hear so many people talk about how like YouTube is a time sink for them. And I've actually tried to sink time into it because I'm like, what is everybody talking about that like they just get on these like YouTube rabbit holes, you know? But I've only tried to do it on mobile and I can't do it.
in the app or in
the app.
Chrome.
So even as intended, you know, but I'll spin it up to like watch something that I know I want to watch and I'll start there, you know, like some new folding ideas video or something, you know. And then like I try to do what would be next or try to like find new good stuff. And like every recommendation I see, I'm like, I don't want any of this, you know, like, and the whole experience of using it, I'm like flipping my phone horizontal versus vertical all the time, trying to like, so I can see controls versus not see controls. Like the whole thing is such a shitty experience to me that I just don't.
Well, it's because you're doing it wrong.
Well, it's like, did people like start there and like kind of learn it? And now it's like,
Nah. YouTube is the modern equivalent of having a TV in the kitchen.
mm-hmm.
You don't watch it. It's just on.
But the thing is, it's just because that's the
it's
part,
just on all the
that's
time.
the part that I don't have.
Yeah.
I don't have that experience because like I only watch stuff on YouTube that I like find and want to watch, and anything else that comes up, I would rather have it off than have that on in the background. You know, so
yeah,
like
I've never been able to do background to anything,
Yeah.
YouTube or podcasts.
Let's think about even with podcast. Yeah. So for me,
Podcasts
like
I
the
could
time
do.
that I spend on YouTube is more like it's very rare that I like pull up a YouTube video and then it's just the only thing that I'm doing. I almost treat it like a podcast. Like I more listen to YouTube than watch YouTube.
Yeah,
which is kind of weird.
I guess that's probably how I would do it if it weren't for the case that like as a medium, then of course everything is tailored towards the audio visual mix, and so it's there are like literal podcasts that are also podcasts, but then I just listen to those on my podcast app, and where sometimes I'm a little annoyed because I'll start describing something that they're visually showing, presumably, you know, in the YouTube version.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, whatever, that's fine. I get the gist.
You made your choice.
I made my choice, but I don't. But things that I see on YouTube feel like the visual component is necessary, but maybe it just feels like that because it's YouTube, you know?
Yeah, I essentially do like I'll watch interviews or rather listen to them. And otherwise, I'll do stuff like watch recaps of like The Daily Show, you know, and like stuff like that. But it's I don't really like fall down a rabbit hole. You know what I mean? Like I'm not just like what's next? Recommend, just like clicking through the But yeah, it does like it can. I think as with all these things, you know, you can enter into it from an innocuous place. Like, oh yeah, like there's like one of my favorite podcasts is on YouTube, and it would be cool if I could like see them instead of just hear it, right? And like because it's on your phone, it's in your pocket, just like any of these other things. It's very easy for it to just keep expanding its time.
Yeah.
You know, just keep filling those cracks where like you hit a point where your phone is no longer in your pocket. It's just in your hand always, wherever you go, you know, and like you can just always have something going on. And I think the real downside of it that I found for me personally is not necessarily YouTube, but just like all of those time sucks that exist on your phone in general is it makes it very easy to fully delete introspection from your day.
Yeah.
Like when you're talking about like, oh yeah, like, you know, if I'm putting Mava down and I've got like 15 minutes, it's like before the age of Kindle and phones and everything else, like that's time where you would kind of sit there and just think. and there is something to be said for giving yourself that space to just be bored and just let your mind wander and chew on things.
Yeah, I felt a little bit. I guess I just felt a little more with it the last week, if that makes sense.
You would be, yeah. I think that mental downtime is really important, but it is boring also. and like, what was that fucking experiment where like they just put people in a room with a wire that would shock them and like see how long they sit there? Yeah. And like within 5 or 10 minutes, people just start tasing themselves because it's preferable to being bored. And it's like, that's basically what Twitter is. Like you're just tasing yourself with like outrage.
Yeah,
right?
that experiment, I think is funny because like my interpretation of that has nothing to do with boredom and it's fully about curiosity. Because if you put me in a room
with nothing else in it.
Yeah, like all I would be thinking about is the thing you told me not to touch, right? It's not a boredom problem. And I would be like, I wonder. And I would be like obsessing about like, what would it feel like? You know, like how.
Yeah,
how
I do agree. I think that experiment is probably testing for the wrong thing. But kind of the point being that like, that you're probably going to do something.
Yeah,
you're
I mean, we don't
sit
like
there.
being bored, you know, which is
we don't like doing nothing and thinking. We want to do something, even if that thing is just like something really fucking weird. Like they told me that this wire would shock me.
I'm gonna touch
but will it though? So, anyways, let's get to a question.
Let's do it.
All right. Highest upvoted question from podcast.bscotch.net comes from UppasitFlitwip, who says, "Hey, B-Scotch Bros, was curious on your guys' thoughts on learning to code. Do you think college is a good choice or maybe a boot camp or just learning on your own? I recently started a boot camp that I did extensive research on since I know that they can definitely promise more than they deliver.
Yeah,
but I felt
and they can be
that
very expensive.
Yeah. But I felt the guy that runs it genuinely cares about changing people's lives and getting them into a programming job. So from my own take on this, like this is something we've talked about quite a bit over the years in the podcast. But my take on it is if you're determined to do something like learn to code, then there are lots of things that can help you. There's like an infinite number of things that can help you.
Yeah.
They'll all give you a leg up because if you're really determined to do it, then you're not going to only do those things and you're going to be doing a variety of things and spending lots of time digging into it, right? If you aren't really committed to the idea of learning this thing, then none of these things will help you.
I think
because you got to take it.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of a thing with like the particulars, like so like any given program, whether it's in a college or a boot camp or even something that you like find on YouTube and like self-enforce, right? Any one of them has a bunch of embedded opinions about how to think about the particular problem space that you're in. I've talked a lot about, for me on the art side, I could not find someone who wasn't just talking about the particulars, all the details about line width, about how to have a good hand when you put down lines.
It's the art version of you start computer science and you spend your first 2 months learning about memory pointers.
Correct. Yeah.
Where you're like, but what do I do?
But who cares?
So what do I do?
So for me, that was always like, I guess what I'm trying to say is that the scaffolding that you're getting, that someone else has put together some scaffolding for you, right? And no matter what context it's in, is going to be kind of randomly fitted to what might actually like really work for you in terms of how you would approach it, right? Whether it's more top down, more bottom up, more project oriented, more kind of abstract and figuring out technical stuff, whatever. And so I think it's just important to note that.
And whether you have ADHD,
how your brain works in the background.
Yeah, at that point, you're not in control. You just, those things are going to happen.
Yep. So it's like, I think you have to keep that in mind whenever you're going through one of these programs, which is that it's easy. I know what I did. For me, I thought that I didn't like programming because of the way that I was introduced to it in college.
That is fundamentally one of my true deep beliefs is that when people say they don't like programming or they don't like math, they don't like X, it's because they had bad instruction. And that's the only reason.
Yes.
Yeah, because all that stuff is pretty fucking cool.
The thing is, it may not even have been bad instruction. That was interesting to me. It's like some of the kids in the class, like my programming class, for example, clearly were having a great time.
Yeah,
it didn't.
It was a
fucking work
well-aligned
for me.
instruction, right?
Yeah, I think that's what it is. It's easy again to like conflate the two in a weird way, but so I would say just look for signals of whether or not look for signals of while you're taking something like your boot camp class or like you asked if you're in a college class or whatever else, signals of how you actually would like to approach this thing. What makes it so that you get excited to do it and you're kind of thinking about it in the back versus things that make it where you're just like, oh, this is kind of drudgery and I don't even feel like approaching it today.
And there are a lot of big challenges with that, right? Because you're correctly saying it's kind of an introspection problem of self-awareness and trying to understand, like, how do you learn? Why do you want to learn this thing specifically?
And how do you meet the material?
Yeah. And what's going to get in your way? What's going to make things easier? And unfortunately, we all go through a standardized education system that also doesn't bother to teach us how to learn, which is fucking remarkable, right? And it also pretends like we all learn the same way. At least that's the average experience in the United States anyway. So like, I mean, I made it all the way to college, never having once thought about how do I learn, right? Never once, all the way
people
through
just tell you
college.
what to do, and
you do the thing
and then
that
you
you were told to do.
Forget about it.
And it wasn't until I was finally exposed to stuff that was well beyond my like capability and knowledge when I first ran into it, that I had to suddenly do all of this self-discovery to figure out like, what's hard? Why is it hard? You know? And honestly, looking back, I did a terrible job at that because it was the first time I did it, you know, like I didn't know what I was doing. And it was like, then the next basically like, well, up until now, you know, couple decades of my life of constantly confronting stuff that was new and I didn't know how to do and that I was bad at, that I had to slowly learn over time how to learn and how
do you approach these, or how do you shape them before you even start trying to deal with them, right? And how do you detect those shapes that you know are good? And I think that's what's interesting me about the question, because the question typically is always about the basically the analytical structure that you're given. So is it a class in college? Is it a workshop? Is it a boot camp? Is it a YouTube series that you bought? Skillshare, whatever. And I guess my general point is like, don't get trapped in that medium question, because the question is really a little bit different, which is just how ought the material be shaped to work best with you. And if you don't know the answer to that, that's fine. But then you just sort of, in my opinion, go for a smorgasbord approach.
Yeah,
and try to find, if you're interested, I'm interested in programming, I want to do it. There's going to be someone who teaches it in a way that you're like,
but take that time to then introspect where you're, because know that you're not just learning how to program, you're learning how to learn how to program. And that's actually, the problem that you're trying to solve.
Think about it like this. Think about it like music. Okay. If you said like, I want to learn the banjo, because we all want to learn the banjo because banjo's fucking sick. Right.
Yep.
If you say like, should I go to a banjo boot camp? Then my answer would be like, sure, but you're still gonna have to practice a fuckload.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Should I go to college and like major in music to learn the banjo? Yeah, but you're going to have to play the banjo a fucking lot on your own.
Yeah, and also you're going to be doing most of the stuff you'll be doing in that scenario is not playing the banjo.
It's not playing the banjo, right? And so I think there's something that I've noticed. I think probably all of us have noticed when talking with people who take classes for programming or designing games is there's a tendency to be inert, as in you do nothing unless some other person shows up and pushes you forward to the next step, right? An instructor says like, you need to learn Python. Here are the things we're going to learn about Python. You will learn those things and nothing else. Unless you go out of your way to figure out, why are they teaching me these things? What else can Python do? Let me come up with some projects and do some of my own stuff, right? Because like if all you do is let somebody else dictate what you're going to learn next, then you will not become a capable programmer. Yeah, you just same as playing the banjo.
It's a curiosity problem, right? And it's so, and this is why it's so tricky. Education is so tricky because like you need a scaffold when you're getting started in most of these things, right? It's very like the idea of bootstrapping yourself into like programming and just kind of like wilding out, trying to find out an entry point. It's a very challenging thing to do, right? It's really helpful to have some scaffolds in place, but essentially detecting when like
a building isn't made of scaffolding. The scaffolding goes up around the building so you can build it.
Yeah. So I think that's the trick is like once you get just enough and you find a way to get started.
Yeah, because you do need those entry points to even know 100%. How to be curious. And I think
the craziest thing for me, like programming, was trying to set up an IDE. I was like, I just want to program, and they're like, literally all of my problems were we were using some I don't know, some Java Eclipse, I think, or some shit. And I was
fucking nightmares. Yep.
I didn't even know I couldn't figure out why we're even using it. I did not understand like why the fuck.
I had the same beef because they don't tell you what an IDE is, why you would use it, what the alternatives are. So like to me, like the first 2 weeks of an intro comp sci course,
it's too abstract. You haven't done any shit, right? Yeah. So it's like and then you're dealing with like all sorts of my machine issues where it's like, well, I installed it, but like I'm not seeing my UI doesn't look the same as the professor's. Now I don't even know where the fucking buttons are he's talking about. to do stuff. My highlighting's different.
Yeah.
Like I don't,
Dude,
I'm like,
there's
I don't
a
know what's
reason
important here. You know,
there's an important reason why I could not learn to code until I got Game Maker. It's because for Game Maker, you just download the program,
Just open it.
There it
start
is.
doing
you're done.
stuff.
You're done now.
Yep.
You open it and you can make games in it. You don't need to download other dependencies. You
You're
don't
not
need to
picking
separate
libraries.
IDE.
Yeah.
You don't need libraries. You don't need plugins. You just fucking boot it up and you're making games.
Yeah. And later
fully
on,
standalone,
you discover,
you know?
ooh, it actually would be kind of nice if I had some of those things, right?
Oh,
But-
yeah.
But that's a weird starting point to be like, let me assemble let me be Tony Stark in a cave building my own dev environment with a box of scraps when I don't even know what the fuck any of this.
Yeah. So to me, that's like, and so I know so now when we get to that question of like, how do you then learn, right? So for me, like that stuff then opens up all of these questions where what I then need is like, I need to like get into the abstract understanding of like, okay, actually what is an IDE, right? Like why is this hard? And I need those answers before I can progress. Cause if I don't have them the whole time, I'm just like uncertain and kind of paralyzed, right? But other people can just set aside the fact that they're like, I don't know what the fuck, I don't know why I'm doing any of this, but now I've got code in front of me, so I can focus.
But it's what
on
I've
the
been
code,
told
right?
to do, so I'm going to do it.
And so like if you're me, then you can't get past just the whole like the fuck is even happening here.
That's where I was.
Yeah,
I couldn't get past
need
it,
a
but
different
also
approach.
wasn't interested in it because I was like, this isn't the thing.
Yeah, it's
I
not
didn't
the
sign
thing,
up to learn about fucking IDEs. I want to program stuff. And they're like, IDEs though. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Are we
It's one of
talking
the
Like if you were taking driver's ed and they're like, okay, so first we're going to learn about the physics of combustion engines.
Exactly. And it's like,
I wanna
stop.
drive.
I want to drive.
I'm not a fucking mechanic. I just want to drive the car. I don't need to build the car. I just want to drive it.
It's one of the many reasons that I love JavaScript as a language is that kind of like with GameMaker, like you could just open up the dev console in any fucking web page in your browser, in any browser even, right? Harder in Safari, but like otherwise, and not on, I guess you can't do it on mobile, but anywhere else you could just open up any browser,
Yeah, you can start typing shit.
any
and hit
website,
enter
and you
it
could
starts doing
just
stuff.
you can just start writing JavaScript, right? And if you don't know anything, like kind of weird stuff can happen because there's already JavaScript running doing stuff, right? And so you can get some confusing outcomes and stuff, right? But if you just open up a blank page or just like a random tiny ass website, you can just start doing stuff and trying things without going through that whole process of and the reality is there's a very complicated environment that's like in there making all this stuff work.
Yeah, but that's somebody else's problem.
But yeah, you don't even have to think about it until you've learned
Shouldn't be a
enough.
problem.
Yeah, to run into some problems where now the answer is, oh, well, that's because you're in a browser context. In a browser context, blah, 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 you know? And that's why we have Node, which takes you out of the browser and it has its own things, blah, 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 blah. But until you've got to confront stuff after like understanding some of the basics, then all of that stuff is just in the way. It's just...
And this is why I have a visceral reaction to programmer solutions to programmer problems because they always fucking do this where they're like, oh, well, I'm making a tool for programmers, so therefore it's hard to use. Here's a GitHub link and a README that has 39 steps with listed all the dependencies. Hopefully it's kept up to date because we'll see, right? And then you got to, it's like every time you want to do something as a programmer, it's like an IKEA problem, like they just give you an instruction manual and a bunch of parts,
And I'm less
I just want a
allergic to
couch.
it.
I just want to sit on a couch.
Yeah, and I'm less allergic to that because of my path through programming was very different because Seth basically started in GameMaker and then that's
I started GameMaker because I had tried to start for 5 years prior to that and kept running into programmer created solutions, like setting up your own dev environment on your,
and so you settled into this domain and that's your programming domain, right? Yeah. And I started through like learning some basic C++ for fun via some course book I found that was like, it was about making video games in C++. And
I also read that book, but I failed to learn C++.
And for me, like the topic was interesting enough, and it got to that right level for me of like abstraction of like what even are we doing, that kind of stuff, right? And so it met where my brain was at really nicely to kind of get started. But then from there, I was working as a lab tech, and then I went to grad school, and I was using programming to solve all kinds of problems that I was facing. And I had to like interface with weird like I had to interface with microscopes and stuff that have their own thing. Like I had to do all this weird shit where my starting point was like some C++. And then I didn't have options really. I was just like, whatever I knew enough of or had to use, I had to then go reach for and try to like learn enough to use that. Right. And like that was my path through early programming and like learning that. And now I spend almost all of my time in JavaScript based things, right?
But there's also like a black box aspect to it. If you're new to it, where like you just can't figure it out. Like,
yeah, you don't know how to debug. It's all about debugging.
How do you make a Python file?
Yeah. The idea that you just make a text file and
you literally just
extension.
save. Yeah, you save a text file as .py.
Yeah.
There,
How the fuck does that work? You know what I mean?
And the way it works is the same as any file works, which is it doesn't mean anything.
Yep.
It's a signal to the computer to say, hey, next time I open up this file, open it with Python. Yep. That's all. Like, and of course, like if you don't know that that's how the computer handles files, which is a file is just a pile of bytes. Yeah, that's all that it is. And the file extension tells the computer what program to use to open it. That's it. That's all.
Well, this is actually, honestly, this is like my own personal belief about the order of operations for what should be taught is actually what a file is to me the first thing people should learn, and very basic
never learned that
concept of encoding. But like not deep, just like a high enough level where it's just like, what is a file? Because in the end, programming is just opening a file, putting some shit in it, and then running it through a program. That's what all programming is, right? But if you don't understand the distinction between like a Word document and a text file, then the black box space that you're starting in is so like you're in a black hole, right? You don't have anything to hold on to. Everything is slippery. And to me, like that was just like things that I learned really early that just like flipped a switch where I was just like, oh, it's actually
way simpler.
It's way simpler than I thought it was. Yeah. There's way less magic going on than I thought that there was. And that kind of magician reveal, right, of like, oh, there is no spoon, sort of, we're just mixing metaphors here. But that was the thing that I was like, oh, actually, I think I can figure this stuff out. If I can get the right answers to the right questions, then I think I can figure this out. And that was basically my journey of like trying to identify the right questions and getting the right answers.
Yeah, and just finding those little nuggets where you're like, oh, I think I get it, right? So like, for example, you can go to a PNG image or any image, a JPEG, doesn't matter. It's just a file. It's just a file. Right? Mm-hmm. And you can open it in Notepad.
Yeah. And you can look at
open it.
And if you look at the first bytes, you're going to see what's called the header, which is the first few bytes of a file for some kinds of files tells you what kind of a file it is. Like,
but here's the crazy thing. You're not looking at the bytes. If you open it in a text file,
you're looking at the interpretation of the bytes.
You're looking at, because again, like it's just binary. It's just ones and zeros, right? And it's those ones and zeros are set up in a way that an image viewer will be like, oh yeah, like I know how to interpret these ones and zeros and show an image based on them, right? But if you hand that to Notepad, the Notepad is like, oh, you told me to open this pile of binary. Well, I'm a text bro, right? So I'm gonna look at everything as text. So you're still not gonna see ones and zeros. You're gonna see it turning or like reading the ones and zeros as text characters, and it's going to look like a bunch of weird.
But some of the stuff in there, that like the beginning part of that file, is actually supposed to be interpreted as text. It's just that part an image reviewer just ignores. It uses that to know what it's reading. But then it's like, cool.
I think it's the sort of thing where it's like, because I think you got to find the fit, right? And that's what I mean. Where I think being just sensitizing yourself to how you're reacting to the education, like to the education you're getting, and then asking questions about it. Because for me, the stuff you guys are talking about is still in the realm of like, I don't care until I can like do something. It just doesn't matter to me how any of this stuff works. It's essentially like I want to know how to drive a car by pushing the pedals, moving the fucking gear shift around, steering it bso I can do that in a parking lot.
Focus on doing and then.
Yeah, I don't need to know all of the road signs.
It's when to learn the next. Education is always an order of ops problem.
Yeah.
And as you're saying, for every person, the order is different.
Yeah. So
but also, you can't know the order that you need it in because you don't know the material. So all you can do is
have false starts.
Yeah. All you can do is try various entry points and figure out. And really, it's like try various entry points. And then when you get stuck, because again, your goal is to learn how to program, because if you do that, you'll incidentally become a programmer, right? And so the challenge that no matter how you start, no matter what your path is basically, what do you do when you're stuck? What do you do when you run into something and you're like, and even if you're not stuck, but you're just like, I don't really get why this works, right? what do you do? And if you can figure that part out and then do it really effectively, then that's what's going to allow you to kind of like navigate as you confront the reality of like the material versus how you learn.
Mm-hmm.
That'll allow you to navigate that to discover like, oh, do I need to like try a new path now? Have I reached the end of what I can do with this current material? And so on. And like for programming,
can you mutate it, to fit your needs?
Yeah,
like that's the actual part where it's like, once you get good at it, then it doesn't matter how someone's trying to teach you something. Yeah. You can just ingest
what they're.
Yeah, because you know how to process it in a way that then would make it of interest to you.
And that is, I agree, is like the most important skill for learning is because you don't get to choose the materials, because if you could, you wouldn't have to learn it. So you might have a wealth of material to choose from, but any given piece, Sam, as you're saying, it is what it is once you actually do get a hold of it, right? And so that is the challenge: is how do you learn how to learn? How do you convert the material into something that you can get the most out of? And how do you decide when to go look for other material, right? And if you can do all of that really well, then it's the beauty of programming. It's like there's so much fucking stuff out there, and all you need is a computer. And that's it. Computer and internet, and like that's your toolkit. And especially in the beginner space, there's infinite. I'm also infinite bad stuff, but there's infinite good stuff too, right? Of resources out there and other people who are in exactly the same position as you, exactly the same. And in fact, most of the content online about learning how to program is the beginner stuff, because people fall off as they go. Therefore, most stuff is targeted to very early beginners and so on, right? So the sheer volume of content, and again, communities of people also trying to figure it out, is enormous. And so the other trick to all this is find your way into communities where you can help each other as you're trying to struggle through the thing. You can ask. So there's like infinite discords. Even places that are a little toxic but have some good pockets, like subreddits and some other places, right? Like there are places everywhere where you
good ideas are for everyone. So
well,
sometimes
and
you dig them
importantly,
out of a trash pile, but that's fine.
And I'm not sure if this is true on the art side of things, but something that I've noticed in programming communities that I think you should be careful of when you're first learning is a lot of people have very black and white opinions about what languages are good, what types of sorting algorithms to use, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, when you're first getting started, just actually pretty much always just ignore those people because
they're wrong even when they're right.
Yeah, correct. Because if you go into this rigidly inflexible way of thinking about things, you're just going to have a bad time and always feel like you're doing the wrong thing. But at the end of the day, all that matters is, does your code work?
Yeah, I think
does it do what it's supposed to do?
Well, there's a similar joke in the art space, but I think it looks different. But it's this obsession with brushes. You see it all.
Which
the time.
brushes to use at the right time?
What brushes do they use? What are you doing else? And like, man, you can use the first brush that you have access to on Photoshop or Clip Studio, the first pencil, and you can make just gorgeous stuff. You can just use a soft round brush, which everyone's like, don't use that. You can.
People get tribal. It's weird. They get tribal about every fucking thing.
I think it's important to note these things and like try not to spend energy on them, right? Because it's like you will hit a point where you are interested in like, how do they do that thing that they're doing? Some particular artist in this case, or programmer, or whatever else. Do they have access to some tool? Is there a tool they're using? Which is a good question to ask. And a brush feels like it could be one of those things in this context. And sometimes it is, right? But it's all about how you use it. And so there's great artists who give great demonstrations, like Cynics is one of the best ones, of just using the quote hard round brush, which is like just a standard fucking brush in most programs that you start with, to make just phenomenal paintings. Because it turns out it's not about the brush, unfortunately. So,
well, if you can't make something that looks good with a basic tool, making your tools way more complicated and elaborate is probably not going to help.
And I think you don't want to get suckered into the whole like, don't do this, just do that. This is bad, this is good thing. But seeing those discussions, if you approach them with curiosity, can be extremely useful because then you get to ask the question is, why does this person think that? And what do I think about why they think that, right? Because that's where you get to, again, convert just like people being weird, right? Into actually increased, and not even necessarily increased understanding, but an increased awareness of what you don't know, right? Because if someone says, oh, you can't use this because there's this performance problem, blah, 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 now you can kind of put that in your memory bank as like, okay, so like performance is something I could be thinking about. And supposedly this is
Matters
better.
in
But
context.
like, but when does it matter? When does this thing specifically actually matter? Like you get to arrive at a kind of new set of questions that you don't have to answer right now necessarily, right? But if you go from a thing where somebody presenting as an answer and turn it back into questions, then that's again where you get to continue the path of learning how to learn rather than getting distracted by fights about whether or not this is a real programming language, whether or not this is an efficient way to do things, whether or not you can make good art with X tool, because the answer to all those things is like, people have done it. People have done everything with everything.
And also just
And so can you.
Well, also just because someone else was able to do it with that doesn't mean that that's going to work for you. And just because someone wasn't able to do it, but that doesn't mean that you suffer from the same issues they had. You might be able to do just fine. So like,
Stay flexible, stay curious, just try stuff, But like ultimately it is just all about that curiosity and self-determination where like whatever you do, it's on you, whether it's a boot camp or whatever, like you still have to put in the time to do the exploration and move things forward yourself. So think about your programming, just like learning art, learning music, whatever, like you still have to put in lots and lots of time to move yourself forward and learn how to learn it.
Yeah. I think a good indicator is as you're, whatever you sort of try to do, if you don't find yourself being like, I don't get this, and then Googling, right? Or if you don't find yourself as you're like working on a problem set being like, oh, what would happen if I did X and like tweak it to see what would happen, right? If you don't find yourself doing that kind of stuff, which is basically like going anytime you're confronted with like, I guess if you don't find yourself asking questions.
You don't find yourself in a flow state really.
And trying to answer them beyond just literally what the material is, then that's, I think, the strongest indicator that you're not approaching it in a way that's going to be successful.
Exploring. Exploring is the name of the game, I think, with this.
Are you having fun with it? Do you find yourself just like on a Saturday morning, just getting up and just losing the morning because you had some fun, cool, weird problem that you were trying to figure out? Like that's, if you hit that point, then you know
really
that then you're good to go. Like you're a programmer and you're just on track.
Yeah. But it could and it doesn't have to be fun all the time,
It's not.
It's annoying most of the time.
I'm not the flow state thing because it's like a lot of times when you're learning stuff, you're not in a flow state at all. It's like very
You're just you're banging your head against something.
No, but you'll hit it. You'll hit it at certain points. And it definitely won't be the case like right out of the gate.
definitely.
So I wouldn't use whether or not you're having fun as an indicator, but whether or not you're getting like sucked in is helpful. But even that, like when it's really hard, it's hard to get sucked into. I think the main thing is just, are you curious and are you approaching it in an exploratory way? And then as it goes on, as you learn more and so on, you'll find yourself getting into flow states, you'll find yourself having fun. Yeah. And that's then the better indicator of like, is this even for you? Because there's still
those are
always
positive indicators. Yeah. Like if you're having fun, then you're good. If you're not having fun, that doesn't necessarily mean anything yet. But just be on the lookout for those. And I think that's all the time we have for this week. So thanks for the question. Hope that helped. I would like to thank our producers, Fat Bard and Sampa DaCosta, for putting the podcast together. And thanks to our community moderators who keep our Discord running. To get more involved in the Butterscotch community, just go to podcast.bscotch.net, where we have links to the community Discord, a way for you to donate, and links to the podcast archives. And if you haven't yet, head on over to Steam and give Crashlands 2 a wish list. It'll help boost the game, for when we launch, and it'll give us some more visibility, and we'd appreciate it. So thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Goodbye.